All right, thank you for your patience, everybody who is here on Zoom. We are now live on Facebook. So for those of you joining us on Facebook, welcome. We are live tonight for Bring Home the Chateau with Bob Bertheau from Chateau Ste. Michel. Also on the line, we have Zach and Jason, who are here to also help answer any questions you have about the wines. We have Lisa Goslin from our wine marketing team. If you have any questions about where in the state you can find any of these great wines, she's your gal. And in honor of Veterans Day and the amazing donation that Chateau Ste. Michel is going to be making to Veterans Count, we also have Kathy and Joe from Veterans Count New Hampshire here on the line tonight to tell us a little bit about their program. So, Bob, I would love to kick it off with you and have you tell everybody a little bit about what you have planned for them tonight.
Okay, fantastic. Welcome, everybody. We're going to take you 3 time zones to the west, to Washington State tonight, where I make wine. I've actually been the winemaker here now at Chateau Ste. Michel since 2003. Before that, I actually made wine in California for 16 years. And so a lot of questions I get, because California is still a large majority of where American wine is made, is kind of how does Washington State differ from our California or even any other wine producing state. So we're going to start with a little bit of education before we get to the wine. So to kind of show you what Washington State's all about in terms of wine, I'm going to share a screen with you. I'm going to share a quick little PowerPoint. And let's start from the beginning. So here we are. Here's my state, Washington State. And a couple of stereotypes some people have of Washington that I want to dispel tonight is, number one, it's the Washington, not the Washington on the Potomac, but the Washington on the Columbia. We're in the West Coast. And the other kind of stereotype we get is, how can you grow grapes in the rain? Okay. So what I'm showing you today is that we actually don't grow grapes in the rain in Seattle. We actually grow grapes on the east side of the mountain in Washington State. If you look at the map here, there is a mountain range that kind of separates the west from the east side called the Cascades. And the Cascades control all the climates on both sides of the mountain. So all the weather you hear about in terms of the drizzle and the rain is on the west side of the Cascades. If I can take you now over the mountains, over Snoqualmie Pass, about a 4-hour drive, you'll enter into the east side of the state, Columbia Valley, where we actually grow all the grapes. And the grapes are grown much more in a high desert environment than what you might think of in terms of Washington State. So here's the precipitation that we'd look at. If you go to the very, very far west of the state, on the west side of the Olympic Mountains, it's one of the rainiest spots in all of North America. It can get upwards of 240 to 270 inches of rain a year. And the Olympics take some of the energy out of the weather. By the time you get to the Puget Sound area where Seattle is, it's more like 35 to 40 inches of rain, which is really not that much compared to other cities as well, but we just tend to get it in 0.02 increments. So I call Seattle weather perpetually threatening, okay? And then you hit the Cascade Mountains that literally block almost all the rest of the precipitation, but also carries a lot of moisture though. We get a lot of snow in the winter. You can see 10 to 15, even up to 20 feet of snow in the winter. But by the time you get all the way to the east side where the grapes are grown, there's only about 6 to 10 inches of rain, which is really more of a high desert. So this is really what really kind of starts our climate effect. We call this the rain shadow effect for Eastern Washington to grow the grapes. I love this because of the colors. This shows the precipitation by color. So you can see what the difference is in terms of the precipitation in the different areas of the state. It's the same representation, just a little bit of color. So how are we different, say, than California or even France? So here's a picture of hours of sunshine during the growing season. And if you see, Columbia Valley is the maroon line. We actually have quite a bit more sunshine than Bordeaux or California because we are so far north. We're at about the 46th parallel. So being so far north, we get 1 to 2 hours more sunlight during the key growing months of July and August. But if you see on the far right side of it into October, it turns around just the opposite. So we have this amazing amount of sunshine that ripens our fruit in the summer. But when you get toward the end of harvest and more of the Cabernet and Riesling ripening time in October, we actually have very short days and cold nights. And that allows us to have what I call this wonderful hang time and softening for the reds without getting the sugars out of control. And for the Rieslings, it allows us to retain all our beautiful natural acidity as the temperatures stay cool. And this This is what we call heat accumulation. This gives you a perspective of where Washington State is in terms of the rest of the world, in terms of how much heat units we have during the growing season. So the lower the number here, the cooler the region. So you see way on the far left, you have the Rheingau or Rennes and Champagne. And on the far right, you have the very, very hot regions of the world as well. And the 3 orange bars are 3 of our growing regions in Washington State. So we can vary from something slightly on the cooler side to actually something on the quite warm side. So we really do have a lot of different growing regions within Washington State. And this just shows it by month. You see the bar, the blue bar is Washington State, how we're some of the hottest temperatures during the summer. And then going into October, we dip way down and become one of the cooler growing regions of the world compared to some of the other places, even almost as cool as Burgundy, which is considered a very cool region. So I kind of call this as kind of a bipolar growing season. Very hot in the summer, but very cold going into the months of October and even early November. So here's a perspective of what kind of varieties we grow in Washington State, kind of broken down. I like to say the big 5 are Cabernet, Merlot, and Syrah for the reds. And then for the whites, it is a Chardonnay and Riesling. Even though the Riesling's a little bit less than the Chard, I mean, there's so much more Chard grown in the U.S. compared to Riesling. This shows you how over-indexed we are in Riesling. We are literally the Riesling kings of the U.S. Just want a couple of vineyard shots to kind of let you know what you see. We're not growing grapes in the rain. This is our Cold Creek Vineyard, which is one of our most iconic vineyards planted in 1972. And I show this more to show you that it's more of a desert climate, and it's not the rain of Seattle. And this is our other vineyard, Canary Estate, that's right on the Columbia River. That affects the vineyard, more windy, more elegant, a beautiful, beautiful finesse-driven wine that you're going to see in a couple of the wines as we go forward. All right, so that's my little education piece. Now we can get to some wine. So, Carolina, as I was going into PowerPoint, were there any questions that arose from the little education piece, or should I get going?
So we did have somebody on Facebook who was surprised to hear that not all of Washington State is rainy. So thank you, Bob, for clarifying about the great state of Washington. And Tracy, who is here on Zoom with us, who has been to all of our 90 Days Around the World events, she is definitely in the running to win the home bar giveaway.
Wow.
She wants you to know that your Chardonnay is one of her favorites.
Oh, good. Well, we've got it downstream here, a few wines down the road. So as I mentioned to everybody, Riesling, you saw how we are kind of over-indexed in Riesling, and we really do kind of own a category. It's very rare when a winery owns a category, and we do own, because of the amount that we make and the quality and the styles we make, we own the category of American-grown Riesling, and we take that very seriously. Our Riesling was one of the 2 white varieties the state was founded on, and we so love the variety, we wanted to bring a partner into the foray. The first one I have to show you is the Eroica Riesling. I have the 18 vintage. I don't know what you have there, but Eroica this is our very, very, what I might call our top shelf Riesling. It is a joint venture project with a German winemaker named Ernst Losen. And if you've ever seen the world of Riesling from the eyes from the Mosel, you'll know that Ernst, or Ernie as we call him, because he's Ernie. Once you meet him, he's not an Ernst, he's an Ernie. He's one of the most well-known and respected Riesling winemakers in the world. And Ernie came to Washington State because he sells a lot of wine here in the U.S. Back in the late 90s, 1998, he actually was having dinner with someone in Portland, Oregon, where he has his sales distribution. And he had a bottle of our Riesling and quizzed his dinner partner all about it, and actually contacted us within a week. He saw that we had already had a partnership with an Italian winemaker named the Antinoris, where we have a project called Cosolate. And he thought, what about a joint venture with him to really bring up the category of American-made Riesling? So we make this Eroica wine with Ernst Losen. The first vintage was 1999. So we're just coming up, this 2018 is our 20th anniversary of the Eroica wine. And to make this wine, we're not looking to make a German wine. Ernie will be the first to tell you that we're not here to make a German Riesling. We're here to find out the best what Washington State can be. So one of the things we do here in Washington is we have what's called the Riesling Rendezvous every couple of years, and we have the world of Riesling descend upon Woodinville, Washington, and we all taste each other's wines. And it's really fun to find the stylistic similarities from the Rieslings around the world, whether you're tasting one from Germany or Austria or Australia or Washington or even Michigan, some of these smaller regions that are doing really, really nice work with Riesling. And we find that it's one of the most terroir-driven varietals. In other words, it really shows the place of where it's grown, okay? So when Ernst comes to taste all of our Rieslings each year, we blend together. We're looking for not the really, what I would call overt, juicy pear or peach pear style of Riesling that you might be familiar with. We're looking for something a little leaner, a little more racy, and almost more on the citrus side. So something bright and fresh and flavorful and super versatile with food. So, you know, Riesling, one of its problems is, well, okay, one of the amazing things about Riesling is you can make it in any style, from bone dry to really, really dessert, ice wine, Trockenbaron Asseles the sweet, and make a world-class wine, okay? But that's also one of its problems, because people buy a Riesling, sometimes they don't know what they're getting. They're unfamiliar with what they might be getting, or there's a stereotype that all Rieslings are sweet, which is certainly not true. So we basically are showing this wine to show the Washington State style. It's just off dry. It's not bone dry, but it has a very, very dry impression that goes with food really, really well. You know, all of our Rieslings, we have a little, what I call a sweetness meter on the back now to give you an idea how sweet the winemaking team perceives the Riesling to be. So we can make up to 8 or 10 Rieslings in a year, depending upon whether or not we make ice wine and some of the other wines. And so the winemaking team gets together and just decides where in the progression of sweetness that we perceive the wine. So if you have any of our Rieslings, turn it around and you get an idea about what at least we think in terms of the sweetness or the perception. So the wine to me has this almost a minerality. It has more this lime citrus flavor, and it's, as I say, dry but not bone dry. And I think one of the things that the chefs love with these wines is that the food versatility. Okay, so with this Riesling, I mean, kind of the no-brainer pairing would be like Asian fusion, sushi, curries, anything with a little bit of spice. These Rieslings go really, really well with. But you can also go more traditional German and go more, you know, sausage and sauerkraut also go very well with Rieslings as well. So basically, before we leave the Riesling and move on, bottom line is, please don't think all Rieslings are sweet, okay? Please try a lot of different styles and find out what you like, okay? And don't be afraid to try some different wines and see what pairs with your food and your palate better, and enjoy them with food. They're really meant to go with food, and I think they're super versatile. Great with apple crisp or key lime pie. Love it. See, that's the other thing about Riesling is you can have it from the very beginning as an aperitif all the way to dessert. It can kind of travel the entire meal too, which is fantastic. All right, well, that's the Riesling. I always like to start off with the Eroica because it is, people ask me, what's your favorite wine? They're all my kids, so I have to be careful not to call out too many of them. But I have to say, probably my favorite white wine I do make is this Eroica Riesling, because of the relationship with Ernst Losen, who is my mentor of all things Riesling, and because I really believe it is what Washington State should be known for in terms of white wine.
Great. Hey, Bob, before we move on to the next wine, we just got a big bump in people watching on Facebook. So I just want to do a quick secondary introduction for everybody just joining us. We are live tonight with Bob from Chateau Ste. Michel. He's taking us through a little virtual wine tasting. It is also today all day has been Veterans Day. So we are so excited that we were able to coordinate this tasting for tonight, because Chateau Ste. Michel is donating a portion of their proceeds from all bottles of wine sold in November and December to Veterans Count. So we actually have Joe and Kathy from Veterans Count on the line as well. And Lisa, I was wondering if you might be able to tell us a little bit about this partnership before we move on to the next wine.
Yeah, so we partnered with Chateau Ste. Michel and Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits and the Veterans Count. And we have products that we have displayed in our stores to promote the program. And we've got some great pricing with a great selection of wines. And you could pretty much find that in any of our stores. And like you said, the proceeds will go to the Veterans Count program. So we're very happy to be part of this program.
Awesome. And so Kathy and Joe, for anybody on the line who might not be familiar with Veterans Count, could you just tell us a little bit about what your organization does? I mean, you do amazing things for the state of New Hampshire, so I would just like to start with that, but I'll let you give a little bit more detail. Oh, Kathy, you're on mute. Kathy's just on mute. Just one second, everyone.
Okay.
There
Now
we
can
go.
you hear me? Okay. All right. Thanks to Southern Glazers. Thanks to the New Hampshire Liquor Commission. Obviously, thanks, Carolyn. Bob, I wish we were visiting you and had a little road trip out there. I'll share a little bit, and then I certainly will defer to Joe. Joe is my boss. He's the Chief Development Officer for Easter Seals, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, and Farnham. And I'm actually the Director of Development for Veterans Count. So simply stated, what Veterans Count is we're comprised of 5 chapters throughout the state. We're a very, very strong group of volunteers. I'm employed by Easter Seals, but 85 others are not. They're committed to serving our military by fundraising and spreading awareness, because what we do is support our military and veteran services program, which is one of Easter Seals' 12 core programs. So today's been a great day because it really kind of brings everybody thinking about our veterans, our service members, their families, what they do, to support each other. And then what we try to do is to make sure that all of those people feel that throughout the year. So that's a very brief description. Joe, you want to chime in?
Yeah, just like Kathy said, where Easter Seals is really happy to have our military and veteran services program and have Veterans Count as the philanthropic arm, and to support our veterans, particularly on days like today that is Veterans Day. And they gave us what we have, and we're happy to serve them. And I guess kind of a couple of the quick unique things about our program is we are a New Hampshire-based organization, and the money that we raise here in the state stays to support veterans in our state. We have a less than 10% admin rate, so more than 90 cents of every dollar we raise goes right back to supporting our veterans. And I like to say we treat veterans with a small v. So if you've ever put on a uniform for a day in your life, whether you got injured at basic training or otherwise, we are here to serve you. We're here to fill in the gaps that kind of exist in the service line. And I guess finally, if you know anybody, a veteran struggling or just in need, we call it a hand up and not a handout. I hope that you'll refer them to Veterans Count so we can take care of them.
Great. Thank you guys for giving us just a brief intro into what you guys do. And so Bob, now with your next wine, I think we raise a glass and we cheers to all the veterans on the line and all in New Hampshire and throughout the rest of the country.
Yes, cheers to all veterans. Thank you for your current or past service. It means everything to us. I mean, I know we say it to a lot of people as we pass them in the airport, but this is a chance to say it to anybody who happens to be out there today. So thank you very much for your service. So this is my service, is making wine. So hopefully my service can help you today as well. So the next wine we have is a Sauvignon Blanc. So Sauvignon Blanc has gone through a renaissance. A lot of the renaissance and popularity is through a country called New Zealand. You might have heard of the Kiwi, as we call them, the Kiwi Sauv Blancs. They have raised awareness for the category, and they're wonderful wines. They're very, very demonstrative. They're very in your face, and they have this wonderful grassy gooseberry nose and flavors to them. Ours is really not quite like that. We are not in the Marlborough, we're in the Columbia Valley. Okay, so Sauvignon Blancs from our region express our terroir, which tends to be a little more on the melon and bright and fruity side, and a little less on that grassy, herbaceous green pepper side. So because we are a warmer region, some of those flavors are kind of, you might say, burned off in the heat of the summer. So the wines that we have left, you can certainly tell it's Sauvignon Blanc. It has a wonderful, very, very light grass melon style, but it's a little softer and a little more restrained than Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand. And dare I call it a little more old world in terms of a Sancerre that have more of that complexity, minerality, flintiness, along with a tiny bit of the grassiness. And that's kind of what we shoot for in this style of wine. We actually barrel ferment a small percentage, about 10 to 20%, depending upon the vintage. And what that gives us, when you put the juice in the barrel and ferment in it, it gives you a little bit more palate, a little bit more richness. So instead of the really bright zinginess you get out of some Sauv Blancs, this one has a little bit more roundness to it because of the style of where the fruit is from and because of the winemaking we do by putting some of it in barrels. So I like to say we can't give you as much of that that New Zealand style, so we settle for a little better palate and a little more food friendliness, which I think is what we have with this Sauvignon Blanc. It's we do blend a little bit of Semillon in some years when the Semillon is nice. It's a more classic old world blending tool. This particular one does not have any. It's 100% Sauvignon Blanc, and we tend to get it from our oldest growing region. Our AVA is what our term is called, American Viticultural Area, which is a legally defined region that we grow fruit, like Napa Valley's in AVA or Russian Rivers in AVA from Sonoma. We have our own AVAs of Washington State. We have now 16 different AVAs, but the very oldest one is called the Yakima Valley, and this is where most of our Sauvignon Blanc comes from, is from the very old Yakima Valley AVA that does tend to be a little bit cooler, a little more fertile soils, so you get a little bit bigger canopies when we grow the grapes. That is really what Sauvignon Blanc likes. And as far as food pairing, go ahead, Caroline. You had a comment or question?
Yeah, Bob, we've got a question for you. I think after this, you're moving on to some different wines. So I wanted to ask this question before you do. Do you create any unoaked whites?
Yes. Well, all the Rieslings are unoaked. The Rieslings never get within 2 buildings of a barrel. It's just not what well, I take that back. We do a little bit of Riesling in the very large format oak uprights. But for the most part, 99.99% of our Rieslings are all unoaked. When we get the juice into the Chateau in Woodinville, there's 2 ways it can go. It can go into the barrel cellar and barrel ferment, like a lot of the Chardonnay, or it can go into our stainless steel cellar, where it doesn't see oak, and it sees very cold, fresh stainless steel fermentations that retain all the natural fruit and kind of seals in the wine's raciness and brightness. Sauvignon Blanc, this one is not, as I said, very small percent, 10 to 20% barrels, but the rest of it is stainless steel. And all the, what I call the aromatic varietals, like Gewürztraminer and Muscat and Pinot Gris, all of those are stainless steel. None of them see oak. We do make 5 different Chardonnays. Some have more oak influence than others. It's a good segue to the next wine, which is a Chardonnay. This particular, yeah, that's a good segue. Let's go to our Chardonnay, and we can talk about oak in this wine as well. So this wine we have is our Columbia Valley Chardonnay, and my mantra for this wine is I'll have another glass. That needs to be when I'm making the blend. We all get together, we close our eyes, we taste the wine and go, do you want to have another glass, or in the case, maybe another bottle, if you if you want to go that route. So we make this wine to be more of a by the glass style, where if you don't want to think about it, it's just a wonderful glass of Chardonnay. But on the other hand, if you really get into wines and want to talk about complexities and barrel versus stainless and malolactic fermentation and all these kind of fun winemaking things, I can talk about this wine forever. So I want this to basically please a by the glass Chardonnay drinker for your everyday Chard drinking. But I also, somebody that wants to talk about winemaking and complexity and interest, I honestly believe this wine over delivers in terms of its complexity for its price point. This wine is about right down the middle in terms of stainless steel. Oh, please show the label. Okay, there's the label. This shows up backward, doesn't it, on Zoom? But there's the backward Chateau. So yeah, that's the Chardonnay. And it's 50% barrel fermented and 50% stainless. And the reason I do that is because I love both. I think the stainless steel part of the blend provides the freshness and the vitality and the fruit forward flavors. But I think being 50% in barrels adds the complexity and the depth and a little bit more palate and mouthfeel. So I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too, as we say. I want it to be bright and fresh and easy to drink, but I want it to be very complex and interesting for a wine of this style and price point. As far as the kind of barrels, we use French and American. We use both. We don't like to discriminate. French versus American oak, it's not about good or bad anymore, because if we don't like it, we don't buy it, okay? It's really more about style. So when we look at our barrel experiments, we look for barrels that match a specific style of wine. So we'll taste, sometimes we'll put a lot of Chardonnay into like 10 different barrels, okay? 10 different new coopers, maybe half American, half French, just to throw out an idea, okay? And then we taste the difference and decide which barrel is meant for which wine. So we make a couple of different single vineyard Chardonnays, one from Canoe Ridge Estate and one from Coal Creek, which I showed you the vineyards earlier in the presentation. And the Canoe Ridge Chardonnay is very light, fresh, bright, less oak, more bright, fresh fruit, and it does not like American oak. American oak gives you sweetness and depth. French oak gives you more spice and complexity. And so when we're tasting our barrel experiments, we don't just say whether it's good or bad now. We actually decide, are you a Canoe Ridge barrel or are you a Coal Creek barrel? And then we can talk to the cooper as they come and taste their barrels and sculpt the barrels one by one with each cooper to make each particular wine it's going into better. One other little bit of winemaking for a little bit of education here. There's actually, some wines go through 2 different fermentations. Everybody knows about the primary fermentation with the yeast converting sugar to alcohol, thank goodness, and CO2, a little bit of bubbles it can make, and a little bit of heat. That's basically what's called fermentation. There's a second fermentation that can occur in a wine. It's called the malolactic fermentation, and this occurs after this primary yeast fermentation, and it's all red wine. Virtually all red wines go through it, but for white wines, it's a stylistic decision on whether or not you do the second fermentation. Our shorthand term is the ML, malolactic, we call it the ML, okay? So if we have to decide on a Chardonnay, do you want it to go through ML or not, okay? And what malolactic does, it converts, malolactic is like, it's a term that means 2 different acids, malic acid to lactic acid, okay? So malic acid is the acid in apples, and lactic acid is the acid in milk. So what you're doing is you're making a wine going from crisp and fresh to a little bit richer and broader. So if you go through this secondary fermentation, your Chardonnay gets a little bit richer and broader. And if sometimes you talk about a buttery Chardonnay, that can actually be due to a combination of this and also the barrels you put it in. So, you know, Chardonnay is truly the winemaker's wine because there's so many decisions to make. And again, decision 1, do you want to go to a barrel or do you want to go to stainless? Okay, do you want to go to new oak? Do you want to go to old oak? You want to go to French barrels, you want to go to American barrels, or no new oak. Maybe you go to all old barrels. So I say something like Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc. My job for those wines is to make the wine taste like the grapes. Okay, so I take you out to the vineyard with me and we go through and taste all the Rieslings. You'd see that the wine just tastes like the grapes. Okay, with Chardonnay, there's not as much of that kind of true varietal character. Chardonnay is more wine about texture and richness and complexity. And a lot of that, obviously the fruit has to be very good. But when you taste a Chardonnay grape, you don't really taste the wine. You taste a grape that's very sweet, but has to be sculpted in the winery compared to something like a Riesling or a Sauvignon Blanc, where when you taste it, you go, oh my gosh, that's a Sauvignon Blanc. I know if you could go out to the vineyard with me, we'd have a Sauvignon Blanc vineyard next to a Riesling vineyard, next to a Chardonnay vineyard. You'd go to the Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling, you'd eat the grapes and go, oh, I totally get it. It tastes just like the wine. But you go to the Chardonnay, you go, oh, that's nice, sweet fruit, but I don't get the same kind of varietal character. And so that's what we do with Chardonnay. I call it, it's like a blank clay sculpture where we have to literally take our little chisel out and chisel out a style for the Chardonnay.
So we've got a question on Facebook kind of about the holidays coming up. So somebody wants to know which of the Chateau Ste. Michel wines would be great for Thanksgiving. And I mean, my quick answer is all of them, but I'm sure that between Bob and Lisa that they can, Bob and Lisa can elaborate a little bit about maybe some pairing options about, what would the Riesling go great with?
You know, I have two hats with food and wine pairings. The one hat is just what you said, drink whatever you like with whatever you like. That's all that really matters. I did a dinner a few years ago where a lady was at the dinner, and it was the Eroica Riesling, and she had it, and she said at the first course, we had typical 4 more wines downstream, and she said, "Oh, I just love this wine. That's all I want." And so I went to the back, got her a full bottle, set it in front of her, tell her, "You drink that with every course, and you are never wrong." And she was like the happiest person in the crowd, that the winemaker gave her the carte blanche to drink this one wine with every course. So that's the one hat I like to wear, is never ever intimidate anybody to try and force them to drink something because somebody says it goes with the food. Now, having said that, if you want to play with the nuances and styles of flavors and the textures and the spiciness and the types of protein, it is fun to try and pair wines, as long as you leave the pretense at the door and come in my door and just enjoy the experience of trying to do the pairing. For Thanksgiving, I have to say the Riesling is super versatile. I also have to say our Gewürztraminer, that's a little tougher word to say, but you can find our Gewürztraminer kind of stacked next to our Riesling in a lot of stores, as I'm sure Jason could tell you, or Zach. And the Gewürz with the spiciness is really, really good with the turkey as well. And then obviously if you had protein, if you had more of a prime rib or something with Christmas dinner, then I would definitely go more for the reds, for the bigger Cabernets. We make a specific wine called our Coal Creek Single Vineyard Cab that is what I call my steakhouse red. So some wines like that big red really enjoy a really nice, big, thick steak or some protein in your mouth. But there are some wines that are much more versatile, I think like the Riesling. But what about you, Lisa? What do you think about with turkey or the holiday fare?
I really do agree with you, Bob. I think the Riesling is such a food-friendly wine, and it's just got such balance and really nice flavor. The minerality to it just fits in well with so many dishes that typically a lot of people eat during Thanksgiving and Christmas. But if you've got a heavy red meat or something like that, the Cabernet and, like you said, the Coal Creek is a very great selection. And I feel that the same way you do, you got to love the wine, and you can pair it with anything. There's so many different dishes, side dishes and everything that I tend to like to try to pair with the side dishes instead of the meat itself sometimes too, because there's so many different flavors in like stuffing and the different side dishes that a lot of people have for Thanksgiving. So you can play around with it. And why do you have to pick one wine? You can pick several different wines for your meal, and you can kind of like play around with it and see which ones you like the most.
That's what we do in our house. Obviously, they're a little biased because when I come, obviously, what's Bob bringing to the dinner? Well, he's bringing the wine. Of course he is. Yeah. And so we will literally spread out half dozen bottles, and it's so fun to just take a little bit of all the different wines and kind of see how they play with the food. That's what's the really fun part, is to have enough people to be able to open multiple bottles and then be able to kind of play around with the different wines, with the different foods and the different courses. Now for me, I also have to get a wine that goes with gravy, because my wife makes the best gravy in the world. And when I have my Thanksgiving plate, you can't even see anything on the plate because it's all covered in gravy. And that, I think, is more Chardonnay, with a little richness and texture. Whenever I douse all my food with gravy, I get a glass of our Indian Welsh Chardonnay. It actually goes really, really well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So if anybody else has any questions about holiday wine pairings, I want to give a little plug. Lisa and Chad from our wine marketing team, they actually do a monthly email called Wine Insider Picks. And every month they give suggestions based on kind of the season or what's hot in stores, what's new. So you can sign up for that too. And you can have Lisa tell you what to eat with your meal every month.
And for celebrations, obviously, our sparkling wine, we do make a sparkling wine called the Domaine Saint Michel, or DSM as we call it here at the winery. And I think, honestly, it's one of the best values of all the sparkling wines on the market. You can normally get it in the low teens in terms of price. I don't like to talk price because I know it's different regions of the country, but maybe somebody can back me up with the price of the Domaine Saint Michel. but it's made in a traditional méthode champenoise process, which is extremely rare for that price point of wine. And I honestly think it's one of the most underappreciated, overvalued wines in our portfolio. So if you're doing a little bit of cork popping in terms of a celebration or holidays, I definitely recommend that wine as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Okay, should we move on to the reds? We have a couple of reds here.
What's next?
Next is our Columbia Valley Merlot. So kind of the same looking label as the Chard, but this is our Merlot. So Merlot is a wonderful grape in Washington State. If we went back to my little pie graph on the varietals that I showed you earlier, you'd see that our percent that we are as Merlot compared to Cab, even though there's still more Cabernet in the state on a numbers basis, we are still over-indexed in Merlot, just like we're over-indexed in Riesling. In other words, compared to the amount of Cabernet to Merlot ratio is sold in the US, we still sell a lot more proportional in terms of Merlot, because I think Merlot has a very special place in Washington State. It actually can be, believe it or not, a bigger, more powerful, more structured wine than the Cabernet Sauvignons. And a lot of times when I'm pouring the wines, I'll actually do the Merlot after the Cab. In this particular case, I did Indian Wells Cab last because it is a bigger, richer tier of wine. But if I had both Columbia Valleys in front of you, I would have showed you the Cab before the Merlot, because the Merlot actually has more structure and density. And people ask why. In the old world, if you say that to a French winemaker, they laugh at you, because in most of France, in Bordeaux, Merlot is considered a lighter, fresher style of blending grape for the Cabernet Sauvignon, okay? It goes back to our climate in Washington State, that we have, again, that bipolar of really hot during the summer and cooling down, way down into October. Merlot is actually picked a little earlier in the harvest season. So we're picking Merlot in kind of mid to late September, whereas Cabernet's picked mid to late October, almost a month later, okay? So September growing season is still rather hot. So we're still picking the Merlot in kind of the, you might call the heat of the vintage. And because of that, the wines have a little bit more power and character and tannin and richness than the Cabernet that's hanging on the vine for like an extra month, okay? So and that's what I call the hang time of Washington State, is really the month of October, when it gets very cold and the Cabernets get to hang out until almost Halloween, and they develop this softness on the vine. The longer the vines stay the longer the grapes stay on the vine during the season, it's really more the softer they become, because the tannins will actually soften in the berries, which the tannin is that more the power and the grip that you feel on a red wine. Those tannins actually soften as they hang on the vine. So the Cabernets tend to be a little bit softer because of the hang time, and the Merlots tend to be a little more bright cherry and a little bit more structured. So that's why I love the Merlots of Washington State. This Columbia Valley tier of wines, both the Cab and the Merlot, we talk about is a wine more old world or new world. And what we mean by that, and I know there's old world, new world have crossed over, we're international, you know, but in my lexicon, an old world wine is more complex, not as big and powerful, but more layered and complex and a little more interesting, you might say. Whereas a new world style wine is more fruit centered, more in your face, more powerful, richer, more concentrated wine, like a Napa Valley Cab. Most of them tend to be on that new world side in terms of the power and structure. And people ask us in Washington State, are you more of an old world model, or are you more of a new world model? And my answer is yes, that we have characters of both. I think we have a little more the elegance and the brightness and acidity of the old world. But because we're hot in the summer, we do have a lot of heat units, as you saw. We still can develop a lot of richness and concentration. So we really can do both. Depending upon the varietal, where it's grown, what the winemaker's thinking, you can really stylize a wine, pushing it more toward that old world complexity or more toward that new world power. What we do with our Columbia Valley tier and a few of our other single vineyard and reserve wines is I'm pushing this wine a little bit more toward the old world. Okay, if you want more of the new world, we're going to finish with the Indian Wells tier, which tend to be a little jammier, a little more fruit driven, a little more powerful, and a little deeper colored. Whereas the Columbia Valley tier wines, both the Merlot and the Cab, yes, they still have plenty of power and structure, but if you have them compared to some of the other wines from other New World regions, I think they have more finesse and more in common with some of the old world and more of the Bordeaux style in France than they do, say, with some of the California wines. So this wine, I think, represents our state very, very well. And this wine is, again, for the price, I think we over deliver for all of our wines. That's my main goal when I make all of our wines. And one of the things I hear out when I'm in the market, which I haven't been lately, it's been doing all this for the last, actually I have my very first wine dinner, post-COVID wine dinner tomorrow night at the Chateau, but they got 40 people spaced out over the entire tasting room. It'll be the first time, we'll see how it goes. But when I do my dinners, people say to me, okay, let me step back. When I do my dinners and I get comments from people about Chateau Ste. Michel, the first thing they normally say is, oh, St. Michel, that's the wine I know I can get a great value, any varietal, any price point. I can trust your wines. And that's when I start crying, okay? But that is the hallmark of our brand, is whether it's a Sauvignon Blanc at $12 or an Artist Series Bordeaux blend at $60, we're over delivering, I think, at every single price point. And at this kind of level of this Columbia Valley Merlot, I honestly think we over deliver here too. Not bad. It's only 3:45 here. I'm going to be in good shape by 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
All right, Bob, let's take a little break from the
Okay,
wine.
let's do it.
I got a couple of questions for you.
Great.
So Jessica would like to know which one of your wines would be good for mulling for the Christmas season.
Mulling for the Christmas season, I would say it would probably be the Gewürztraminer with that spice would be really, really good for mulled wine. If you're going for a red, I would honestly think that actually the Indian Wells Cabernet, the last one we have, if you're looking for something with more juiciness and fruitiness for your mulling, I would say the Indian Wells Cab. If you're looking for more something for punch, to put your spiked orange, clove orange in a pot like my mom used to do, I would say the Gewürztraminer would be a really, really good choice. And Riesling. I mean, the Columbia Valley Riesling is good for almost anything.
Great. And then somebody would like to know, do any of the Saint Michel wines have sulfates added?
Yes, all of our wines have some sulfates in them. Absolutely. We make our wines, I think, more sustainably than most. We are on the low side compared to other wines and other wineries. But keep in mind that even if we don't even add any sulfites are created by the yeast during fermentation. So there are natural sulfites present in basically every wine. When you see on a label, it says no added sulfites, but that doesn't mean there aren't sulfites in there. This means that they just didn't add it. So if you truly are allergic to sulfites, I mean, you shouldn't be drinking wine, and the wine will tell you that. I mean, if you're truly allergic, if it is something that you're just concerned about, then you want to be aware of it. Yes, we do add sulfites to the wines. Again, I think we keep them more on the low side than most. Washington State, in terms of its organic and sustainability, is a little ahead of the curve because we really don't have as much of the pest pressure in other areas of the world to have to use all the insecticides, because if you saw those pictures earlier, how hot and deserty it is, a lot of the bugs that bother vineyards around the world don't bother us because it's so darn dry and hot in the summer. So we do have a little better head start on our sustainability, but no, there are some sulfites in virtually all of the wines in general, but yes, in our wines, yes.
Awesome. And then this next question is actually one that I'm going to go ahead and answer. So somebody wanted to know what the code word for tonight's event is. So I hadn't announced it yet, so don't worry, nobody missed it. But then somebody else asked how they enter the code word. So I'm going to just pull up my phone and show you guys how you do it. So if you go to our website, 90daysaroundtheworld.com, that'll give you instructions how to download the Passport app. We're using Scabify for our Passport app right now. And so what happens is you download that app to your phone, and then you'll get a push notification before we do each event. It'll tell you like, hey, here's tonight's event. Make sure you enter the code word to earn your 100 points. So when you get into the app, it'll look kind of like this. I know it's kind of strange looking at my phone through the screen, but you just go in to the question. So tonight's code word is Chateau. So you'll see in the app 3 different options. I know it's kind of bright, but see, yep, there they are. 3 different options for the code word. And so you don't have to type it. You just enter it from the multiple choice and then submit. And then you get this checkbox for task complete, and you've got your 100 points, which gets you a little bit closer to being entered for our 90 days around the world ultimate home bar package. So those were some great questions. I do like to share information about the passport program on these calls anyway, so it's nice to give you a little demo. I hope you could see it okay. All right, Bob, back to you.
Okay. Last wine. We have one more, and we're going to end with the King of Reds, a Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon is by far the #1 red varietal wine sold in the U.S. and around the world, and so obviously we've been plenty here in Washington State. I like to say though, our Cabernets are not, they're very site specific. The good thing about the terroir and finding the right region for the right variety is that you have to have the right soil and climate and elevation and aspect and temperature profile to kind of match the regions with the variety. If you go back and look at our map, our Washington State growing region is like 200 miles by 300 miles. I mean, it's huge. Can you imagine driving either 200 miles in California or 200 miles in France? You're going to end up in a whole new different growing region, okay? So keep that in mind, that our region is very large, and we are just exploring what areas in each region are best with what variety. A really good example of that is our Coal Creek Vineyard I mentioned earlier. It was planted in 1972, okay? And back then, nobody had any idea what was going to be really the thing in Washington. So they had every variety under the sun planted at Coal Creek, and we still do. That old vineyard has Chardonnay next to Muscat, next to Syrah, next to Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet, Merlot, Grenache, Mourvedre, all kinds of, it's like a plethora of, it's like a Disneyland of varietals out there. But over the years, in that style of climate and soil, we've learned that Cabernet is king, okay? So as we've expanded Coal Creek, we've almost gone exclusively to Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's what we think grows best in these regions. So I mentioned those 16 different growing regions around the state. Our next kind of education is to educate everybody about Washington's not just one massive growing region, okay? Washington is broken down into a lot of different areas, as is California, as is France. And that's kind of our next step of Washington. Today you got Washington 101. The next step would be Washington 202 when I come back and we do it again. And we'll go through maybe a few of the different AVAs and what grows well in what region, okay? So that segues to this last wine, is our Indian Wells Cabernet Sauvignon. The Indian Wells tier is a step, and I'm going to say a step above. I'm just going to say a step different than our Columbia Valley tier. Yes, it normally is a few dollars more a bottle, but it's actually moving to more of a New World style. It's bigger, it's broader, it's juicier, it's jammier. It's got a little bit more vanilla oak. It's just a really nice, fleshy New World style of cab, and it's our hottest seller right now. Literally, the curve on Indian Wells Cabernet is going straight up, which is great, because people really, really appreciate this style of wine for the price point. And again, I think that for the price you can find this, you can double that price, and that's what more of a California wine would be in terms of its style and quality. I honestly think this wine really over delivers for its price point too. A little bit of a secret, I'm going to just allow us folks, you're going to hear a winemaking secret that I don't tell everybody, but a little bit of secret to get a little bit of that jamminess also is that I add about 5 to 10% Syrah into the cab, okay? So Syrah is wonderful in Washington State. It is, Syrah likes almost the entire state, makes very jammy, juicy style, all the way to lean black peppery style from a cooler region. And a little bit of Syrah in the cab just adds a little bit more texture and jamminess. So it's not a traditional Bordeaux blending variety, but for us, it works really, really well. This wine also has a little bit more oak character, and I'm not afraid of American oak in this style of wine. As I mentioned earlier, American oak gives you sweetness and richness, and for this style of more of a New World style of cab, it matches actually really, really well. And this wine can be a by the glass red all the way to a protein. I'm thinking of prime rib. I'm getting hungry now. A little prime rib sandwich would be really good with this wine too. So that's my lineup, Carolyn. Are there any other questions? Anything else pop up? I know you wanted a couple minutes to wrap up, but I wanted to respect your timetable. But also, we got through 5 wines in a half hour. That's not too bad.
Yeah, we do. We have a couple more questions.
Okay.
So one of our viewers would like to know if you have any port wines.
Oh, I saw that pop up. We actually make a port wine. It's a brand called Whidbey's, Whidbeys. I don't know if you have it in your New Hampshire market. I don't know if Jason or you, anybody, I'm not sure it makes it out to the East Coast.
No, Bob, it doesn't. I believe that stays on the West Coast. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we do make one. We actually make one from our Cold Creek grapes too. We have a certain amount of wines that we do just for what's called direct to consumer, which we don't want to do. We don't talk about them with our distributor on the line, but we do make some wines that are just what we call in the business D2C, which go direct from our website or to our clubs. And we do make a fortified port for that group as well. You're welcome to go on our website and see what other wines are available there. I don't know, but what are your shipping laws in New Hampshire? Can we ship wines out there?
Ooh,
You know, Bob, I don't recall. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, then you
think
just
so.
have to come out when you can.
But if anyone is a fan of the sweeter style wines, we do make an ice wine in Eroica, which I know is carried by some of the New Hampshire outlets and some of the locations.
Wow, that doesn't get out. That's only a few hundred cases. You have some of that. That's pretty special. Yeah, we only do ice wine. In my 17 years, I've made ice wine 8 times. So it's not every year, like about every other year on average. And so it's special when we do it. So if you got it out there, that's pretty cool. Matter of fact, we still have grapes hanging out for ice wine, just in case we get, it has to be about 12 degrees Fahrenheit to go out and pick the grapes. We haven't gotten quite that cold yet, but you never know.
cool. And then the last question we have, I think this is going to be one for Jason, Zach, and Lisa to tag team, but people are curious about product pricing right now and which stores all of these wines are available in.
Great questions.
So I can help out with that. I can start. So we carry all of these wines that we've tasted, obviously, and they're widely distributed throughout New Hampshire. So pretty much you can find any of them in any of the locations. There's a little bit of a limited amount for the Riesling, but for the most part, you can find them. And if anybody has a favorite store and they want to reach out to myself or Carol Ann, we could let you know which store is the closest to you, what your favorite store is, and let you know if they have that wine. For the most part, the Chardonnay is on sale for the month of November and December, especially with the special promotion that's going on for the Veterans Count program. So the Chardonnay is $7.47 for the month of November and December. The Merlot is on sale as well, and that is $12.99. We have a Sauvignon Blanc too, and that is on sale for $8.95. And the Indian Wells Cab is $14.99 for November and December. And the Eroica, yes.
There it is. Someone wanted to see the label on Eroica.
Yeah, that is $17.99 for November and December as well.
Yeah, and think about that. That is my top shelf reserve Riesling, the very top of the pyramid for $18. I mean, that's crazy. The Chardonnay, you said 7 something? My gosh, that's like our employee discount price.
Hey,
Jeez
we get some
Louise.
good pricing in New Hampshire.
Yeah, don't get me in trouble, Bob, please.
Wow, man, you got screaming deals out there. That's fantastic. I mean, honestly, I do think we over deliver for value, and those are really, really good prices.
So I know
You
Lisa
can buy some with us, Bob.
Okay.
Lisa did just mention all inventory by store is available on our website, liquorandwineoutlets.com. 10 of our stores have curbside pickup options as well, so you could actually order your Chateau Ste. Michel wines online and pick them up. For those of you who pre-registered for tonight's event, we are also going to be sending you a coupon for off your purchase of 6 or more bottles of Chateau Ste. Michel wines. So would you like to know what that discount is going to be? It's $12 off your purchase of 6 bottles. So basically $2 off per bottle. So thank you to everybody who pre-registered. You will be receiving that coupon tomorrow. So Bob, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really had a great time walking through these wines with you. We hope everybody had a great time tasting along. And if you couldn't taste along tonight, we hope you'll go to our stores, pick up a couple bottles, try them at home. Portion of the sale does go to Veterans Count from this month and next month, which is great. So thank you again to everybody. If you have any other questions that we didn't answer tonight, go ahead and leave a comment on Facebook on this live feed. So the replay will be available for you on YouTube and on Facebook, of course. So thanks again. We will be back tomorrow night as well for another event. So check out 90daysaroundtheworld.com to pre-register for tomorrow's event and see what it is. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of mystery. So you go check out the website and see what else we have planned for you. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to Kathy and Joe for joining us. Happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans. We really appreciate you guys being on the line with us tonight, telling us a little bit about the program that's going on right now. Go buy your wines. And we will see you again tomorrow night. Good night, everyone.
Right.